safety issues and things that go on in town, so I don't think they have to be a voting member.
Well, I would only say that I think
mean,
you'd get much more participation out of them if they were voting members. I mean,
I hadn't thought about that.
yeah,
but-
well, you would.
Well, I think if we
If you're
ask,
just there to be used, that's how you're gonna feel. If you're there as a voting member, you're gonna feel as part of the committee. That's only my
No, no,
feeling.
I-
I don't see a problem with making them voting members. I mean, I'm just giving you my feeling on it. And on your members, there's one other group that should definitely be involved here, and that's the Commission on Disabilities. They should be there among anybody, above all. And they should,
and you suggest on.
Yeah, just drop one of the adults.
Well, actually, you're gonna have to drop two, because if you're looking at your 5 citizen voting members, you have 1 senior, 1 high school, and 4 adults, that's 6.
That's 6, but the other two, I had 7 in total voting members. Is it-
Well,
I'm
you
trying
have
to
1
keep-
business,
Right.
1 LUC, and then you have 1 senior.
Oh,
One
I
high
see what you're
school
saying.
and
Yeah,
4
that's right.
You miscounted there.
I miscounted. That was supposed to be 3
Three.
adults, because I wanted to keep the number odd. Does that make sense to you? It should be an odd number, correct?
Yeah, it should be 5.
No, I meant in
Total.
total, in total.
Yes.
If you drop the 4 to a 3, it makes
That's
it
what I
odd.
did, yeah. That's what I just put into that and forgot to do that.
well, I still do feel, though,
Two.
those other 3 should be
I agree with
voting
Joe that
members.
a representative
just
from
my
the
feeling.
Disability should be represented on this, if we're gonna move forward on it.
So that would, do you suggest it as a voting member?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Oh, definitely. If we move forward on it.
But, I mean, voting member, is this, are you proposing a standing committee, or are you proposing an advisory committee?
Well, that's why I put this, that's why I have the word "or" in there. I wasn't sure which is the best route to go, and,
You know, so, I mean, if it's an advisory committee, I don't care if it's 15 members, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a standing committee. The other thing is, them bringing a revision to the bylaws to town meeting, I don't necessarily, I get concerned when we form these committees, they take on a life of their own at times. I mean, either we're gonna assume responsibility for it or we're not. I mean, if we're looking to create something that's gonna have an area of responsibility, then fine, let them, you know, bring forth whatever they want in the way of proposals. But if it's going to be, an advisory committee to the board, and the board would be, you know, they can make their suggestions, and then the board would be bringing forth any changes, bylaw changes and things like that.
well, the,
And again, has it been determined yet that we need a revision to the bylaw?
if you went as, a revision of the 158 bylaw? Yeah, I guess that's something that we can determine, that we can help determine, either through a committee or through an advisory committee setting. I'm making a suggestion of one or the other to the board. I would like the board's feedback. We are kind of a unit, so I look at the board putting it together as a group, rather than me saying, well, we have to go this way or that way. I look for your input on it. The Natick Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Board is an advisory board. All right, so a lot of them I have seen as advisory boards more than I've seen them as committees. And so I don't have a concern either way. I do think we need to address it. I think it needs to be brought before the pedestrian safety needs to be brought before the selectmen for decisions. And if that's the case, then the advisory committee is probably the best and simplest route to go. I think Bob had mentioned more of an ad hoc advisory committee. I don't know if there's a difference between that and what I'm describing, but it's just something that, I think the community's beginning to clamor for this type of committee, because it's a big issue. It's something that possibly could have been used in arguments with the Center Cafe, with the data that we ever pick up about the use on Park Street in that area, where the argument was there weren't many people using it, and in fact, there were a lot of youth that walk along that area. So there are many benefits to having this. The state is looking for communities that do have advisory, sidewalk advisory committees, and bike and sidewalk advisory committees. So,
Well, I guess, first of all, I would stick with an advisory committee if we were to go forward with this rather than a standing committee. There are a couple things that go through my mind. One is that if you have a committee in place, we have a better opportunity perhaps to get grants.
mhm.
We can also perhaps influence, what we're doing in future development. And we can resolve some of the critical issues in town. But, when you say the town is clamoring for this, I think it's only clamoring for it as a result of the action that we took earlier in terms of enforcing the bylaw, which got everybody thinking about this, and a few people upset about what we did. So, I'd like to see the bylaw reviewed, because we found ourselves kind of in an embarrassing situation where we're asking everybody to shovel the snow on the businesses, and the town isn't doing a very good job in certain areas on our own, right? So, I mean, this is how this whole thing got started.
Well,
So, I mean, I like the concept and the mission statement. But I think Steve's right. It still comes back to us, because it ends up becoming a budgetary decision and priorities. Right? How much money do we have to spend? Is it a priority over, a culvert on 62 or whatever,
Right.
right? So,
The purpose is on the basis of making recommendations to the board and putting the board on notice of what needs to be done, whether the town can do it or not. If the finances aren't there, then you can't do what you don't have the funds to do. I mean, that's true with any situation, but with regard to the awareness of the community, I think the awareness of the situation regarding the sidewalks and the snow removal was way before we started to enforce the law. People were constantly, at least for me, were coming up to me and talking to me about the sidewalks, merely because a year and a half ago or so, I stood up and I made a comment on it, and then I started to get phone calls, and this is, so I knew this was out there, and as someone who uses the roadways myself, I can see seniors walking and being restricted from use of the sidewalks because they were not being well maintained. In the Cambridge example, they don't only talk about safety, but they talk about cleaning the sidewalk. I mean, that might be a little bit of an extreme, but.
Your Oregon Trail one here, this one here, it's not just cleaning and maintaining, it's actually building and refurbishing. Where the property owners are responsible for the cost, and they break it down per linear foot for grinding and then also construction. So if you have 100 foot of frontage, it's gonna cost you $2,000 to repair and maintain
So you can,
the sidewalk in front of you, which was interesting.
and you can go all over the place with this,
Yeah,
but
they-
all we
they
want to
wanna
do
know.
is have safe sidewalks. I think that's all we're really talking about.
I want to raise another issue, which is something I've been wrestling with, because I created, through a suggestion, the board created a financial advisory committee back a couple of years ago. And it's an advisory committee. And one of the things that energizes any committee is their ability to be successful and to see something accomplished. So we create this committee, and they put a lot of effort, energy into it, and their expectations were higher than what was feasible because of union bargaining or available funds or just the ability for general government to move through some of these things. So as a result, people lose interest, right? So I have a concern about how we can do a better job of when we create an advisory committee, that we can take their efforts and not just end up making them feel like it was thrown under the table. I know a lot of a lot of things and suggestions that came from not only the FAC, but other people that have been at the meeting. We have accomplished some of these things, but perhaps not to the level of the expectations of the group. So, when we set up a committee like this, we have to take into consideration that very thing.
Well, you know,
If I may.
one of the,
Well,
sorry.
No, I was thinking the same thing, Bob, but in a little different vein, is that the committee would have to understand that, you know, I don't know how to do what you want to do, but I understand what you're saying, but they'd have to understand that their recommendations may go for naught if there's no money to do it. And I would hate to see half of them walk away, such as happened with another committee. There was all good intentions there, many man-hours put into that, but it just can't be done. As long as they would understand something like that. I wouldn't want them being all upset and coming in here and saying, we told you should fix that sidewalk over there, now you have to do it, because it can't work that way.
No, there's no doubt about that. It's an advisory board, okay? And if there's one thing an advisory board should always understand, it's that we advise. The decision
Exactly.
is really in the hands of those who are being advised. That comes with the territory. I think one of the key areas of any committee is communication, keeping you posted on what we're doing, how we're doing it, and look for direction to make sure that we're not going off on a tangent. As long as we try to concentrate on, I try to break it down simply. I mean, the simplest thing is to review bylaw 158-9. We can look at that. That was one of the issues that came out of the, one of the meetings, was to say, well, you know, there are problems with that. So we can review it, come up with some ideas, come up with some recommendations. And again, you know, you're gonna have the bylaw regardless, I think, as you said, Bob, but as you go forward, if we can enhance it and make it more functional, make it work, I think that we present that to you, and then the burden falls on the board at that point. The need for the community to be, well, not necessarily the community, but the town government to be aware of the issues that are confronting them. Because don't forget, if you have a bylaw and you don't enforce that bylaw, I believe the town may be vulnerable to some form of either litigation or some legal action for not.
I don't need an advisory committee to tell me that.
But
If we have a situation that needs to be addressed, we should just address it.
You know, we've said that we needed to address it.
We
Yeah,
gotta address it with all
but-
the care.
I guess my concern still goes back to the experience with the other committee in terms of, you know, how do you get a group of people, right, to put in a lot of effort? And, you know, if they're gung-ho about it, they come up with all these things, and then
There's no money.
it's an advisory committee to us, it comes on our lap, and we can't afford to do a number of the things that they'd like done. And they go away feeling that they put their effort in for nothing, and that's,
Well,
What happens is, maybe I'm not necessarily opposed to this, but what happens is, when someone joins a committee, it becomes a high priority.
they get a
Yeah, no,
volunteer to do it,
trust
right?
me, I
To do
understand
it,
that, I
You know,
understand
to get
that.
it done. And again, it's a high priority, they're investing an awful lot of time and effort and energy into it, but when it falls into the level of prioritization for our projects and our undertakings and our spend of our dollars, it may be way down here instead of up here. You know, so should we be asking people to volunteer for something that may not be able to come to fruition? I mean, one of the most rewarding experiences I ever had in serving in local government was on the Hillview Commission. The reason being was, first of all, they had a funding source, there was money, so you had some ideas, you brought them forward, and in a short period of time, there were results, you know, and you laid out your game plan, we had some long-term and short-term goals, and you could see these things come to fruition. You know, and I've sat here longer than I did on that, I was 12 years on there. It's not the same sitting on this board. I mean, there's some
Yeah.
things, when I first ran in 1988, we were talking about wastewater treatment in the sewer district, you know, part of my platform when I ran in 88, we're talking about it, 22 years later, it still hasn't come to fruition, which brings us to the wastewater committee. I mean, they've been working for a dozen years. You know, They've come up with a pretty good game plan, it's only 28 months.